This was really funny for me to see this. It's like I feel like I have to watch this because it's literally a video. It's called Blizzard's Last Chance. I find it to be it's so fucking funny to me. It's it's so fucking funny. How many last chances are players going to get Blizzard before they realize it's been over for the last 5 years? Let's find out.
So last week, news came out that Microsoft has moved forward with efforts to make Blizzard more prolific. The plan is to launch new games for their established IPs far more frequently than has been the case. Blizzard is notorious for taking their time ever since the early 2000s, with there being 10 years between the launches of Diablos 3 and 4, 12 years between StarCrafts 1 and 2, and it's been 22 years since we got a new Warcraft RTS. You feeling old yet? I sure am. Now compare that with their release cadence in the late 90s and early 2000s. In the 10-year span between 94 and 2004, they launched Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, Diablo, StarCraft, Diablo 2, Warcraft 3, and the world.
Keep in mind that each of these games, StarCraft 1, Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3, I think one of the Diablo 2, all had expansion packs as well. And this is all inside of that timeline.
Of Warcraft, the golden era was 7 games within 10 years. In the 20 years since World of Warcraft, there have been 6 new games with StarCraft 2, Diablo 3, Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, Overwatch, and most recently Diablo 4. Now, longer development times over the past 2 decades have been a trend across the entire industry. This isn't Blizzard specific. What is Blizzard specific, though, is the fact that for a while it felt like that long wait was worth it. The company isn't quite known nowadays as the genre-defining developer they used to be, and it seems like Microsoft, after spending $72 billion in the acquisition, they're not that interested in a release cadence of 6 new games over the course of the next 20 years. Now, I don't think rushing out their mainline installments is going to be the answer.
Well, I don't think it's a bad idea to take a long time to make the games, but the problem is that when you make a game that far out into the future, unless you're making something that's like Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate 3, that's just like, they could release Baldur's Gate 3 10 years from now or 10 years ago, or Elden Ring 10 years from now or 10 years ago, and it would still be a massively popular, hugely successful game. So the problem really is that a lot of these games are trying to capitalize on trends, but they're doing it, it's like they're operating 5 years behind.
Had they launched Diablo 4 a year or 2 earlier, there likely would have been far less content in the game at release, of course, right? I do think Blizzard should take their time, as much time as they need for those big games for their mainline installments. Take all the time you want for those games to make them as good as possible. That should be the focus, right? However, there is another option that interests me, and that would be Blizzard working on games that are smaller in scope, that take less time to develop, and more importantly, ones where they're willing to take more chances. Not to play it as...
I think that this isn't as good of an idea as people might think it is. And I don't know if he's going to bring this up, but Riot just got done doing this idea. They had something called Riot Forge. And Riot Forge was not very successful. And they had to shut it down because the games weren't very good. So unless they're going to be adding in a whole new in-house development studio, if they outsource their games to another person, we've already seen where that goes. Riot was doing it for the wrong reason. Oh, but I'm sure Blizzard will be the right reason.
Safe and to try new things. Well, it turns out that might be exactly what's going on. Microsoft has some big plans. According to sources speaking with Windows Central, Microsoft has recently created a new internal team made up of members throughout Activision Blizzard King. This group's entire focus is to create new games based on Blizzard's popular franchises. But these wouldn't be new big mainline games. We're not talking about StarCraft 3.
Yeah, they're talking about making new mobile games, like making something like, for example, the League of Legends Swarm mode. I think that would be a good idea. Like the fact that they couldn't make like a Warcraft 3 styled hero. Like imagine if you could play as the different heroes from Warcraft 3, but it was a Vampire Survivors type game. Why didn't they do that? Well, it's because they're dumb. That's the reason why. And this is going to be the overall common problem that Blizzard is going to have with everything, is that the people that are making the games over there, I don't think that they have the same level of talent or insight that the guys that were making WoW in 2004 did. Like, I mean, look, I like the people that work on WoW, but if you listen to Kevin Jordan or John Statz or some of the designers of the original classic WoW talk about the game, and then you listen to the people nowadays that are developing the game talk about the game, you know what a really great comparison is? It's the difference between Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power. That's just it. And I don't know what to do about that. World's part, yeah.
Warcraft 4. These would be smaller games in their scope, scale, budget, and ideally as well in their development time. So basically, we're talking about spin-offs for Warcraft, Diablo, and StarCraft in entirely new genres, released far more frequently than once every 10 years or 10 plus years. This is a pretty exciting problem.
StarCraft Clash of Clans. I want it. Do it. You should have already done it. Should have done it 5 years ago.
Position. Now, to quote the article, sources tell me that Microsoft is keen to explore and experiment finding success out of smaller teams that are also integrated with the larger org, almost Nintendo style for seamless collaboration. Microsoft and other big publishers are increasingly concerned about the monstrously ballooning cost facing AAA game development.
Really smart insight by Microsoft. I'm glad they're thinking like this, and I think they're also making a good decision by making sure that all of the development is done in-house. That way they don't have the same problems with quality and promotion and continuity that Riot Forge did. I think this is smart of them to do.
Having studios cross-collaborate more closely is one way Microsoft is exploring reducing cost. Now, later on, he adds that this new internal Blizzard studio is entirely geared up for agility and trying to break free of the bureaucratic bloat that often comes with larger teams. And this is absolutely a truth that we see in action very often across the games industry.
I think Blizzard is probably the biggest... Like, it probably isn't, this probably actually isn't true. It's just that I'm the most familiar with Blizzard. But I don't know how many times, like, things in Blizzard are a certain way because they've always been that way. And it takes, like, 6 months to have, like, a number changed.
Huge studios moving at a snail's pace, taking weeks or months or even longer to release updates, patches, and bug fixes, while simultaneously in that same industry, we're seeing much smaller teams working on their own indie games or AA games that can release updates far more frequently. There's a lot of red tape when a development studio...
I can't imagine, like, being the Diablo 4 developers and seeing that, this is my opinion, Settlers of Calgur, excuse me, not Cowgirl. Sorry. In my opinion, I think it's adding, like, it was more of a hype and a better announcement than the Diablo 4 expansion was. Like, that's my opinion. It was, like, actually shocking to me how big of a difference it was.
Gets to be as big as Blizzard, and while that red tape is there for a reason,
and then, like, by the way, it goes even harder than that. The city that you're building in Settlers of Calgur is going to be the main city in PoE 2. Guys, it's a free game. What the fuck?
And often does tend to really slow things up when it comes to these studios being geared up for agility, being flexible.
PoE still has 100K. I want to show you guys. That's actually a really good one. Sorry, I keep pausing, but, like, this is just, like, I really want to make sure that we get this all the way. This is a level of success. PoE is reaching new heights right now. If you look at the drop-off for this season versus the previous seasons, this season is holding players at a ratio that you can quantitatively assess is unheard of. This game has been out since 2000. I played it since 2012, but I think the official release was 2014. 10 years. And it's still peaking. What the fuck? It's disgusting. Look at these different seasons. I mean, which one was this? Crucible? I played this one. This one was so good. Yep, there you go. I played this one. You know, it is what it is, right? And so, dedication's word, yeah. So, like, it's just... And by the way, this isn't even their new game. Keep in mind, this is the old game. Yeah, this isn't even the new big game that they've been developing. It's disgusting. How can Blizzard realistically compete with that level of insight? With like the Faustus changes with the currency tabs or currency market. How can they compete with the insight of instilling orbs? I'll tell you how. They can't. I do not think that they have the talent on the team right now that can compete with that. The Diablo 4 team is pretty good, and they've done a good job improving the game. But I've actually been thinking, this is, guys, a month almost after the season for PoE has ended, or has come out. I want to go back and play it again. That shouldn't happen. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. You should play Melee. I already have decided when I'm going to play. I'll probably level it up off stream and then show you guys once I get to like red maps or something. Make a ward loop build? I'm not investing 30... I'm not going to invest 76 hours into giving myself epilepsy again. Okay? Like, until they change the way it works and I can do it with a chaos build that's cheaper, I'm not going to do it. I've done it once, that's it.
And responsive and updating on a frequent basis. So the entire initiative here actually sounds and reminds me a lot of what Riot has been doing with Riot Forge, where they're releasing these smaller scale games based on their League of Legends IP, and some of these have seen some great success, like really highly rated, a lot of people really enjoy them. So it's...
Okay, now let's do a little bit of a fact check here. Now we have to go ahead and look into the actual numbers and check and see if this... We're going to fact check this video and see if that's actually accurate. Okay. What's some of the other ones? Is it Numu? I'm sorry, I forgot. What was the other word for it? TFT? No, not... Nunu? Yeah. No, okay. There's another one. I'll do one more. Ruined King. This one did pretty well. This was a pretty successful release. This was not. The reality is that the Ruined King release did pretty well because it was, I think, the first one. And then after that, the other releases did not do well. Like, and we're not looking at the average players, right? Because it's a single player game. Like, I played Mage Seeker. It was a great game. It was a great game. But the problem is that I'll let him talk because, like, he might just end up saying the same thing that I'm going to say.
Really exciting. And I think for Blizzard in particular, as someone who's been a fan of pretty much all of their franchises for the past 20, 30 plus years, there's a lot of potential. Like, they've actually already been playing around with this idea, right? Of making these smaller scale...
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's not going to cover it anymore. All right, so anyway, it's going to go better for Blizzard than it would for Riot because Blizzard has conditioned most of its player base to be used to paying money for games, whereas all of Riot's games are free to play. So when you're marketing a premium game towards a free-to-play audience, you're going to have a lower conversion rate. So I do think that Blizzard has a better opportunity to do it based off of how they've created their audience.
spin-offs. Obviously, you could certainly argue that Hearthstone is exactly that. They took the Warcraft IP, they turned it into a collectible card game reminiscent of Magic the Gathering, but with
Magic the Gathering.
With a Warcraft twist. I mean, it's not exactly like Magic, right? But you get the picture.
You're right,
They
it's
took
not.
the IP and they spun it off into a smaller version of it, a smaller scale thing. There's obviously the mobile stuff as well. Bleh, you know, we're talking about Diablo Immortal, Warcraft Rumble. I don't really care at all about the mobile portion of Blizzard's IPs. But if we're talking about getting more indie slash...
I don't like this idea that mobile games shouldn't be viewed as real games. I think it's reductive. I actually really hope that we see more good mobile games that are fun. Because there's a lot of old games that we used to play as kids that basically nowadays could be mobile games, but now they're just seen as bad. I think the real problem with mobile is the fact of the monetization. It's that mobile is monetized in a way that's shitty.
AA quality PC or console focused titles, there's just so much potential. There's so much possibility. In fact, I think we've seen what that could mean with Plunderstorm. I think this was a great showcase of that. Now, if you happen to miss the craze, Plunderstorm was a genuinely fun battle royale. I had a blast playing it. Blizzard released this as a temporary game mode inside of the WoW client. You would drop in with just a basic attack, go around killing NPCs to level up, collecting spells along the way to build up a loadout of different abilities, all while fighting in lobbies of 60 players with a closing circle, pushing you all together and trying to stay alive to be the last one standing. It was a traditional battle royale, but in the world of Warcraft. But it wasn't just WoW in a battle royale area. Like, they really, in a lot of ways, made it its own thing. You weren't actually logging into WoW and like going up to an NPC and queuing in. It was its own separate game inside of the WoW client. And like I said, it was actually really, really good. I think that if they made some tweaks and some adjustments and some polishing, it could very well be spun off into its own game. In fact, I know of a few people who have zero, actually less than zero interest in World of Warcraft. They do not care. They would never play that MMO, but they played and thoroughly enjoyed Plunderstorm. That's a really good sign. And I think they're just generally around the internet, there seemed to be a positive sentiment around Plunderstorm.
Yeah, it was good. Now, is it good enough to be a standalone game? No. But it was good. It was a good attempt, and I think that what Plunderstorm represents is Blizzard trying new things. I think obviously the Mists of Pandaria remix event is kind of the same thing. I think that's really cool. I like it.
Storm, besides the fact that it was locked behind a monthly subscription.
Yeah.
I think if they spun off Plunderstorm into its own game, probably don't call it Plunderstorm, come up with another name, but make a World of Warcraft Battle Royale as its own free-to-play thing, you could probably just print money with that. In fact, frankly, I think that should be that'd be my suggestion, that this is the first thing that this new spin-off studio works on. It seems like an easy win there. But there's a few other ideas that I would personally love to...
In my opinion, if they do that, I think they should make it like Warcraft 3. They should make the characters that you play like the Warcraft 3 hero units and make it a version of like Durotar or like really like popular Warcraft areas, and then really capitalize kind of on that middle ground between like nostalgia and like BR trends. I think that's what they should do. And like have the matches be a little bit longer. You can even have it be an extraction game. I feel like extraction games are becoming the new BR.
See them take a crack at. How about a Warcraft-themed survival game, huh? Blizzard did spend 7 years laying the groundwork for a shared open-world survival title. It was under a brand new IP, and, well, that was scrapped earlier this year, unfortunately, when Microsoft had a big round of layoffs.
Because it
I would
sucked.
imagine there's a possibility they could use some parts of this, rework it with Warcraft theming, and then spin it out into its own smaller-scale survival game, making use...
Good point, and I think that's what they did with Overwatch. Yeah, and Overwatch 1, like, you guys, I mean, like, look, everybody likes to shit on Overwatch 2. I think Overwatch 2 is an alright game. But man, Overwatch 1, when it came out, dude, that game was, everybody was talking about that game. That game was awesome.
of past scrapped projects and turning them into something new is something that Blizzard has done in the past. Overwatch, most notably, was made from the remnants of Blizzard's sci-fi MMO codenamed Titan. That game also, funnily enough, was canceled after roughly 7 years in development. Seems like that 7-year mark is the killer for a lot of Blizzard games that they're not going to release. And, you know, survival games are also notoriously lower budget titles. A majority of the most popular survival games out there were made by relatively small teams.
I think survival games are falling off, by the way. I think that there hasn't been enough innovation in survival games. And right now, I don't really think that I don't think anybody has like really innovated on the genre in a way that's interesting. Like the last real innovation that I think was meaningful was Pal World.
With relatively little funding, talking things like Rust, Ark, and Valheim. These are smaller scale games, smaller budget that seem to attract a massive audience. It's just a no-brainer. I've actually been waiting 30 years to chop trees as an orc and build my own base. Can you just make that happen, Blizzard?
Yeah, that's what I thought they were going to fucking do with Warfronts. I got so fucking excited. You showed the Warcraft 2 tech tree, and it turned into be some autoplay, auto-win.
Come on, seriously. So yeah, I think a Warcraft survival game is the perfect type of thing that we could hope for from this initiative. But here's a few other ideas. We're spitballing here, just throwing darts, right? How about a StarCraft third-person action/shooter game? Just imagine Space Marine 2, but it's StarCraft, right? It's not even that far.
He's not going to talk about StarCraft Ghost, is he? Okay, I just wanted to check ahead of time. Yeah, we tried that. Yeah. Funny you should mention that.
Far of a leap as the entire StarCraft franchise was originally a spin-off of Warhammer 40k. They're right
crazy.
there. Just put the pieces together. How about like a Diablo-themed dungeon extraction game? Think about Dark and Darker Dungeonborn, but it's Diablo stuff. You got first person, you spawn in, you fight other players for loot, you extract. You could do this. How about a Vampire Survivors auto-shooter battler thing? Any of their IPs could work from that. Heck, we could even see like a 2D side-scroller.
So this is the main problem that I think a lot of these games have. I think this is what Blizzard has as a problem. I think Helldivers 2 has had this problem too, from my understanding, is that the games take too long to respond to player feedback, and by the time the response is made, the players have already moved on or lost interest. So what happens at Blizzard in a lot of cases is that it's not that Blizzard doesn't change things, it's that it takes 8 months for Blizzard to change things. And people get tired after 8 weeks. And so they don't want to come back after 8 months. They've already like mentally disconnected from the game. Like, I don't know about you guys, but like I have that happen with me where like a game can be like really fun, but once I like mentally disconnect from it, I'm no longer interested in playing it. You know, like that's about it. So it's just like, it's again, like a too big to succeed situation where like you have studios. So like, and also I don't think this is entirely a structural issue. I think that it's the people that work at Blizzard don't have the right insight that players need. And I think this happened with Season of Discovery. Some examples of those games. Yeah. Well, like, I mean, for example, in WoW, like the corruption vendor and it being on a rotation, I can give you 50 WoW examples. Or I can give you examples like in the Mists of Pandaria remix. Like it took them too long to calibrate the way that people are going to farm the frogs, and then how the balancing for the different rewards for the game was going to be. And like, I think that's another example of it. Helldivers 2 is probably the biggest example you can think of right now. I think also Path of Exile made this mistake with the Lake of Kalandra. They took too long to address the concerns that players had with the league, and I think that caused a lot of people to just fall off, right? They stopped paying attention to the league. And the worst thing about it is that, and I think this is something that's like, a lot of people might not really see this, but if you look at Lake of Kalandra was actually more popular than the Sanctum League, even though Sanctum is regarded by, I don't know, I'd say pretty much almost everybody that I know as way better than Lake of Kalandra. And so the problem with what happens is that once you train players into a cycle of apathy and disinterest, what ends up happening is that apathy and disinterest has a ripple effect on future products and future editions. And so, like, you can see also Sanctum built up a lot of goodwill, and you can see how this graph doesn't go down as fast as the Crucible graph does, or this one doesn't go down as fast as the Sentinel graph does, right? And then Crucible comes out, and it has a massive peak, right? One of the second highest peaks the game's ever had. And why is that? It's you're building up that goodwill. And this is something that Blizzard used to do a lot of, is they would invest in the goodwill of the community. I think the best example of that is BlizzCon. People are talking about, oh, BlizzCon loses money. Well, oh, BlizzCon loses money? Well, what about the money that's made from having everybody talking about your company and their trade show for the next 2 weeks? How do you factor in marketing for that? Like, how do you look at that? It's just like it's such small level thinking that it's very frustrating as somebody who's a fan to see such, in my opinion, like massive mistakes being made. Affliction was very fun too. Yeah, I'm sure, right? But like you see how the ripple effect happens. And so like Dragonflight in a lot of cases was an improvement over Shadowlands and BFA, but because people had already been tired of that, a lot of people didn't have the same level of enthusiasm for it. And I think you're seeing that even more so now with the War Within. I think the War Within has had the least hype for it than any expansion I've ever seen. I think also, hey, here's another great example. Somebody brings it up in chat. I actually didn't think of this. I should have. New World. New World should have addressed the problems in beta when I fucking said they were problems. But they should have especially really addressed them whenever the game came out. And by the time that New World improved the quality of the game and they made it better, everybody had already decided that it was a dead game. Look at Lost Ark. The exact same problem happened. And so it's, again, like people, and I've already, like with Lost Ark, they added solo raids. If like you could take a time machine and put me back in the release of Vicus, and then in 2 weeks after that, they're adding solo raids, I would be so fucking excited for that. But I have already like mentally disconnected from Lost Ark. I am no longer interested in the game, really. The was not Kadan raid. What's it? Not Phaedrus. Fucking what's his name? Thamine. The Thamine raid looked really cool. It did, but like I know what it's gonna be. Somebody does something wrong, everybody dies. And so I just don't have the interest for it. And I think that's what's happened with a lot of games. That's what's happened with Blizzard a lot too.
Like Hollow Knight, but it's Diablo or Warcraft or something, right? Really, I think that they could just take a look at any of the popular indie or AA games and genres, and they could just create spin-offs of those using Blizzard IPs. If nothing else, I would love if that's what they just did that, and if we got some decent games out of it, that would be really cool. It would be
nice if we got good video games. So that is all really interesting.
Like I said, I think there's so much potential for cool things that this development team could work on. The Battle Royale and the survival games being the ones that are most immediately promising and appealing sounding to me. But at the same time, what's going on with Blizzard proper, right? The main development teams, what are they up to? Well, of course, all the existing stuff marches forward with them continuing support on current titles. World of Warcraft kicks off the first of a planned trilogy of expansions for retail, launching the War Within later this month. And of course, Classic WoW and Hardcore WoW and Season of Discovery are likely to continue marching forward. Diablo 4 is also getting its first big expansion with Vessel of Hatred that is coming in October. And Overwatch, StarCraft, and Hearthstone, they all still exist. Or
if inside of the Vessel of Hatred, Mephisto does not make Ner'el, or whatever the fuck her name is, tear a person's heart out in the top of a temple and kick the corpse down the stairs while the blood splatters everywhere, I will be extremely disappointed. If we don't have at least one fully cinematic animated human sacrifice,
so I am told. But
Oddly
what else
specific.
is the company up
because
to?
it's
Well,
cool.
as mentioned, they did have a survival game in development for about 7 years, but that got canceled last January when Microsoft announced a big round of layoffs. One of the most heavily affected groups was the vast majority of the development team for Project Odyssey, which was the code name for their survival game. Most of them unfortunately got fired, and those who remained ended up moving on to other projects. This was a pretty big blow, especially considering from all we had heard, the game was actually shaping up nicely. Over the past 2 years...
Yeah, I believe it when I see it. Let me see it. I don't believe that. Oh, they just canceled the game because it was too good? Sure.
Or so, we have seen several leaked impressions from playtesters, and they were all fairly positive. Also, there were a lot of ex-Blizzard employees and various people who are known for leaking info in the industry that spoke quite highly of Blizzard's in-development survival game as well. So the fact that this project seemingly was
the same people that spoke highly of Diablo 4 too.
Doing all right, but then got outright canned. That is a real shame. I think there's at least some part of the reason, however small, there might be some part of the reason for this cancellation due to the fact that it was a new IP. Now, when these layoffs took place, Phil Spencer said on a few occasions that going forward, they are going to be primarily focusing on Blizzard's strengths and in particular on their existing franchises. So maybe that survival game does get reworked and repurposed into...
I actually think that like, I understand why like they want to do that, and you saw like I saw like a clip of like Vince Vaughn talking about this on like Hot Ones, where it seems like a lot of Hollywood, there's like so much of a consolidation of resources around trying to capitalize off of existing IPs rather than creating new ones. But I think really where the enthusiasm and the real spark of excitement comes from is actually from new IPs. Like Elden Ring isn't Dark Souls 4. It's Elden Ring. Like, as far as I know, like Baldur's Gate 2 and 3, there's like not a lot of continuity there. Like, it's effectively the third version of the game, but it's not like you needed to play the other games in order to understand it. So I think really you don't need to capitalize on an IP. The First Descendant, yeah.
A new Warcraft thing. Who knows? I'll keep it on my wish list. That's not all, though, actually. Since the survival game got axed, we have caught wind of another new project in development at Blizzard. A few months ago, there were numerous job openings posted for a new, unannounced, open-world Blizzard game. That's right. Positions available for the creative, narrative, and art directors, as well as concept artists, gameplay engineers, animators, combat designers, and design directors for both missions and combat AI. That is a lot of positions, and it is very clear that the game is still in very early development. In fact, it may still very well be in pre-production. We're also not sure if this is a new or existing franchise, although again, Microsoft has made it clear that they want to focus on existing ones, so I'm just going to assume as much. But we did get a tiny bit of information from these job postings. So with the missions and combat AI, it was made clear that this game is going to have a PvE focus. In the combat design roles, they mentioned wanting monsters to be interesting, memorable, and challenging from the initial threats all the way to legendary boss encounters players will talk about for decades.
What,
Clearly,
like
they are
Dark
going to
Souls?
have some leveling, power, and or difficulty progression in this game, with you starting in lower tiers and working up to higher tier encounters to eventually reaching legendary boss fights. The world designer will be, quote, defining and iterating on a collaborative vision for
Monster
open
Hunter
world gameplay and content.
I mean, I actually think like this is a opinion that I have, is that I think that the next really big MMO is going to have more in common with Monster Hunter than it does with WoW. I think that that's the future, and like also I think it's going to have more in common with like the way that I feel like this is, again, I'm not a big player, but like I've watched content about it with RuneScape. I think that the future of MMOs is going to be primarily synchronous gameplay, primarily solo gameplay, with group elements that are added in that are not felt to be mandatory inside of the game. I think that's the future of MMOs right now. Like lobby games, well, they're like, okay, so like a lobby game. Let's abstract that a little bit more. Stormwind is a lobby. That's the way I see it.
ranging from sprawling exterior zones to tight and intense claustrophobic interiors. And then finally, the level designer will be designing and implementing captivating locations and environments, integrating gameplay mechanics, challenges, combat, and puzzles into level designs. So while it is all really vague, we at least have the understanding that there's going to be a focus on PvE combat and encounters with PvE enemies and legendary bosses. There should be some leveling and progression tied to that as well, based on how they're talking about the breadth of this thing. And it is going to be an open world game as well. Once more, though, this is likely not even close to complete. It might not even be started yet. It could be a good 5+ years before we get any sort of a reveal of what this is. So don't hold your breath, right? There is still hope yet as well for fans of the StarCraft franchise. That's right, as shortly after Microsoft's acquisition of Blizzard,
I can't wait for StarCraft fans to get a pay-to-win mobile game. I'm so excited. It's going to be great.
Spencer mentioned plans to, quote, bring back dormant franchises, which include the likes of StarCraft. Yeah. In an interview with Jez Corden, Spencer said, the diversity of business models allows us to invest in different kinds of content and still have financial success with that content. We look at the back catalog from Activision and Blizzard. We get really excited about the things we can do. Now, when Jez asked him about StarCraft in particular, he said that they'd want to ensure Blizzard was part of the discussions to revive any of those franchises, and that it wouldn't necessarily...
You can see, like, by the way, remember what I've said before about how, like, the reason why why RTS is dying is because of micromanaging? Like, if you guys played StarCraft 2, watching this clip, at least for me, was a little bit painful. Because, like, you're going to want to micro, like, 2 to here, 2 to 3 to here, 1 to there, right? That's the reason why it's fucking dying. Right there.
Discussions to revive any of those franchises, and that it wouldn't necessarily simply be a case of spinning up a new team to handle them. Notably, though, when Spencer took to the BlizzCon stage in 2023, he did specifically shout out StarCraft fans, and when Jez asked him about that, his response was, I want our fans and customers to know that I don't bring up games just to tease to no end. If people have watched how we have teased things in the past, there's usually some kind of a reconciliation of those hints later on. I'm not one to try to lead people on. It might not happen in the timeline that people would love, but usually when I tease, there is something there. So he's kind of like confirming without confirming that they are, at the very least, Microsoft is in at least considerations of reviving the StarCraft franchise. Otherwise,
they're going to.
Have brought it up.
They have
That's
to.
What you can
like, it's obvious.
Right? Whether or not that's going to happen.
Like, you think Phil Spencer's not stupid. He's not a stupid guy. The people that work at Xbox are really smart. I think they actually are genuinely smart. I fucking guarantee you Phil Spencer's played StarCraft. Of course he's going to try to do that. Obviously.
Happen in this decade? Who knows? Okay. So yeah, I mean, hey, there's clearly a fair bit going on at Blizzard right now, all things considered, from this new development team focused on smaller scale AA/indie level games for their existing IPs. Once again, I'll reiterate, I will take that Battle Royale and or Survival Warcraft themed game, please. World of Warcraft, both classic and retail, along with Diablo 4, they are continuing to get updates and will be getting expansions for the foreseeable future. While the survival game was canned, we do have this brand new announced PvE focused open world game that's ramping up development. Phil Spencer has also acknowledged interest in reviving StarCraft, as I just mentioned, and I should add that we saw job postings back in 2021 for an unannounced action/FPS game that was said to be in development for PC and consoles with online integration. We do also know they've got several mobile games in the work, if you care about that. I don't, and yes, for sure.
I do. I hope they're good. I hope they're fun. Yeah, like I don't mind mobile games as long as they're fun. Like, I view mobile games like they're arcade games. And I like arcade games. They're enjoyable. Sure, I hope they're fun.
Most likely more unannounced things and not yet revealed things. I will say, though, personally, like, barring a reveal of StarCraft 3 or Blizzard releasing another full-blown MMO, I think what I'm actually most interested in seeing is this new, smaller, more agile dev team what they come up with. There's just, again, so much potential for Warcraft, Diablo, and StarCraft if mapped onto so many genres. Battle Royale, survival, Souls-like, roguelike, platformer even. That, like, you could just take Blizzard IPs and put them onto so many other game types and genres, and it could certainly work. And I hope that's the sort of thing that they plan to be working on. Whatever comes of it, though, I will be sure to keep you posted as we see and learn more. But that is all for today. Thank you, as always, for watching. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time.
Yeah. So
last week,
is this Blizzard's last chance? You know, I thought that with Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls. And that came out in, I think, 2014. I think that people will keep eating shit and convince themselves it's chocolate for the rest of time. That's just the way it is. Blizzard has no more last chances. Yeah. This is their 14th last chance. Okay, guys? Do you think a remaster of Warcraft 2 is a good idea? Is it a good idea to do it? I mean, I don't know. Was Reforged a good idea? Like, here's the problem. Is that there are a lot of ideas that are good. Blizzard, like, we can all come up with a lot of good ideas. Like, oh, this sounds good. I'll link you guys the video. It's so funny. Blizzard's last chance. Oh my god. I just think it's so funny. There are a lot of great ideas that Blizzard has. Like, for example, corruptions. Now, maybe this is going to be a crazy opinion, but I think that corruptions, the way they worked in BFA, should have been, you know, like how Blizzard gets really lazy now, and instead of making a 4th raid tier each expansion, they just rehash the old ones? I think corruption should have been the 4th, like, season 4 mechanic for every new expansion. Like, corruptions were such great game design, and they were such great gameplay. And Blizzard just decided to give up on them. And so I'll be right back. I've got more to talk about. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about, like, what I think is going to happen, because I was thinking about that Monster Hunter thing that I said. About how I think the next big game is going to be like Monster Hunter. Let me see if I can go ahead and explain this in a good way. So this is what I think that is going to happen with MMOs. Is that I think the next really big MMO is going to be a mix of, and this is the design of, right? Obviously not the game itself. Monster Hunter, OSRS, Rust. And I think this is what the next MMO is going to be to some degree. I think this is what's going to happen. And I think that there will be probably a little bit, because I think the system works very, very well. I think this is going to be somewhere. Because I think the pawn system of how this is designed needs to fit into MMOs, but I don't know how it will fit yet. It's really just the pawn system that I'm talking about. Like, I don't know what it's going to be. What about Once Human? Maybe. I'm not sure. Like Final Fantasy Trust? So basically, I think that we already know what people want out of an MMO. And this is going to sound crazy. But I think the reason why we know is because of anime. Look at all of the popular isekai animes. Look at the commonalities between them. These are the experiences players want to have. These are the experiences people are looking for. And so I think that that's probably the closest thing that we have to what's going to be the next big MMO.